Millions of children in Sudan go to work each day instead of going to school, in part because of widespread poverty and in part because the education system does not have the resources to accommodate them. Naba Muhyiddin reports from Khartoum.
15-year-old Murtada Al-Hag left school 3 years ago to earn a living to support his family. Murtada lives with his parents in Khartoum and makes under $4 per day. The situation hampers his dream to become a doctor.
My mother kept telling me, in the future, and when our life gets better and not worse, I'll study and become a doctor. But all of a sudden, the whole political situation occurred in Sudan.
Sudan is ranked as one of the poorest countries in the world. Soaring prices sparked mass protests that led to the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir last year. The political situation has stabilized, but the economy is still struggling. In Khartoum, it's common to see children working as traders, carpenters, blacksmiths, and at other jobs. Most earn $1 to $1.50 per day. For Murtada and thousands of children his age or younger, they have to choose whether to study or to feed their families.
Children in South Sudan are subjected to the worst forms of child labor, including use in armed conflict and forced labor in cattle herding. Poverty is arguably the most significant factor contributing to child labor globally, with South Sudan being no exception. Children's incomes are often understood to be necessary for the survival of the household, with 91.9% of South Sudan living in multidimensional poverty. Children are even forced into fighting into armed conflict in Sudan and South Sudan civil war. During the second civil war that occurred in Sudan between 1983 and 2005, many children were forced to serve in armed conflict. The armies on both sides of the civil war had enlisted children to fight. Experts estimate that there were between 7,000 and 19,000 child soldiers in South Sudan as of February 2021. Poor education in South Sudan increases participation in child labor. As a result, only 31.5% of children aged 6 to 14 were enrolled in school in 2019. Despite the fact that education is free, the rate of primary school completion sits at just 25.7%. Nearly 3/4 of primary school-age children in South Sudan are being denied an education due to civil war and a food crisis. The world's newest nation has 72% of children out of school at primary level, the highest rate of any country.
أبي مات بشارع 40 دحين أنا أشقى على أسرتي مع باقي اللي أنا أصرف عليهم كل شيء. أنا اسمي أنس وصيب سيف عمري 12 سنة. أنا أشتغل بورشة حديد من الساعة 7 للساعة 6. أحيانا أسرع أحيانا أقص أحيانا أرنق أحيانا أنقش أي حاجة أنا أعمل. لا الساعة لما تدين الساعة 6 أوقف. أنا وقفت الدراسة عشان ما في أحد يشقى على أسرتي. أدرس أخواني الباقي من دون 4 وأنا الخامس. أحلم إن أفتح ورشة أبي وأشقى على أسرتي وأندي لهم مصاري. وأدرس أخواتي الآخر الجامعات وأطبخ أي شيء.
Child labor in Yemen. Children in Yemen are subjected to the worst forms of child labor, including in commercial sexual exploitation, sometimes as a result of human trafficking, and armed conflict, including by Houthi insurgent forces and other armed groups. Children also perform dangerous tasks in fishing. Labor is an everyday reality for around 23% of the children between 5 and 14 years old in Yemen. The prevalence of forced labor in this country is all the more serious as the abuse of these children is abundant. From sexual exploitation to slave treatment, these children are the objects of cruelty and malice. Their health, physical as well as their mental, their security and their development are drastically affected. The trade of children is still present today in Yemen. Sometimes there is even the families that put their children in the trafficking networks. These young children are then objects of the most exploitative trafficking. In particular, there has recently been an increase in child sexual exploitation through certain practices such as pornography and tourist marriage. Furthermore, other children see an abominable fate in the trafficking of organ transplants.
These serious violations of numerous rights guaranteed by the International Convention of Children's Rights are rarely reported and practically never sanctioned. The principal motive of this impunity resides in the Yemeni legislation, which doesn't cater for these types of crimes. Finally, no specific protection of minors who are victims is implemented in this country. More than a quarter of children are not educated in Yemen. This lax education affects more girls often than boys. Furthermore, the establishments are seriously unhealthy, the structures are extremely insufficient and in poor condition. Consequently, the children's health and hygiene suffers in these schools, where very often there are no bathrooms or recreational areas. The presence of armed forces in the country makes travel to school difficult and dangerous. The children are terrified at the idea of crossing the roads in Yemen to go to school. The parents, who are often just as frightened as their children, often let them stay home.
Karachi is the biggest economical and commercial hub of Pakistan. It generates about 75% revenue of the whole country and has highest employment rate. Unfortunately, like many other developing countries in the world, literacy rate in Pakistan is very low, which is one of the major causes of child labor. But still, a large section of population is living beneath the poverty line, and child labor begins from there.
Tucked under the shade of the trees, it's brisk business at this roadside motorcycle workshop in Islamabad. Young children working side by side with adults. Many of them come from large families whose only option for survival is to send their children to work. 12-year-old Baba joined the mechanics here as an apprentice so he can support his family. His ailing dad, Baba says, makes money by washing other people's clothes.
उम्र क्या है? कैमरा के 15 साल। आप यहाँ पर क्या काम करते हैं? यहाँ सर्विस का काम करता हूँ। एक दिन में पैसे कितने कमाते हैं आप? 1000 कम कमा लेता हूँ। और आप कितने साल के थे जब आपने काम शुरू यहाँ पर किया था? 2 साल हो गए, 13 साल का था। और आप स्कूल पे जाते हैं? स्कूल पे नहीं जाता हूँ। आप पहले जाते थे स्कूल पे? पहले जाता था। अच्छा, आप यहाँ पर काम क्यों करते हैं? हमारी मजबूरी है। अच्छा, आपकी उम्र क्या है?
12 साल।
आपने किस साल की?
5 साल से घोड़ा चलाते हैं।
आप रोज यहाँ पे आते हैं हर हफ्ते में? कितने बजे आते हैं?
1 बजे जाते हैं, 1 बजे आते हैं, 12 बजे जाते हैं।
अच्छा, आपको घर वर के हालात सब चल जाते हैं इसकी वजह से?
चलते हैं, इससे कमाते हैं।
आप कितना कमा लेते थे?
इधर हाँ,
कितना कमा लेते हैं इसकी?
1000-1500
दिन का? बिल्कुल सब सेट है घर में। आप खुश हैं? कभी स्कूल जाने का दिल नहीं चाहता?
कभी जाते कभी नहीं जाते।
जाते हो स्कूल?
अभी नहीं जाते।
एक टाइम पे जाते थे तो क्यों फिर स्कूल?
10 साल। आप कब से काम कर रहे हैं? 2 साल हो गए हमारा काम। आप क्या काम करती है? हमारा